Joyce, you're muted.
Oops. Hi, everybody. I'm talking while I'm muted. Excuse me. Welcome, everybody. Elfrida, hi.
Good to be back.
And hello, Mylan. Hi. And Barrett, we talked like an hour ago. Hi again. And Jim, hi, welcome. Our group is the group that is going to focus on community building. And just thinking about community building took me back to a lot of memories of community building in our earlier ICA, EI community. But before we go too far into that, let me just check in with people about the assignment this past week was to really notice the aliveness around you or within you. Just to notice aliveness, that's interesting. In your daily walking or being out in the world in any way, what did you run into? What did you notice? Or were you able to sort of practice that? I know we have really a practice kind of assignment to notice several times a day, try to notice several times a day.
I practiced. I actually got in a fight with my friend who wanted to buy us both watches where we'd set the alarms and it would go off sporadically and you would notice aliveness was the assignment we had, that you might want to set an alarm. She was doing a kind of a reflection on, life and what was important. And I didn't want a new watch to do that. We had to fight, and I thought, well, that's aliveness. But I mean, I had the nature stuff too. I appreciated Jim sharing his. He's real good about sharing from, and it helps. And then Evie put hers up on the thing. It was precious. But let's hear from some of the others.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this morning, Paul and I were sitting out on the porch having a cup of coffee, and the critters all come out at that same time because he feeds them. And we had a squirrel, birds, chipmunks, all eating from the same piece of food that's spread out there. And it was really just a delight to watch. I'm complete.
Good.
Well, we have a swimming pool in our apartment complex here. We live in a co-op with about 82 apartments. Wow. And cottages, and it has a community swimming pool, and I in the summer it's not heated, so in the summer I use it, in the winter I don't. But I was kind of down today, and I had I was tired, and I was kind of moping around, and I just said to myself about an hour ago before we got going here, I've got to get in the pool. And so I went out and I just started, I call it swimming, but it's really jumping in the pool. But I actually did about 8 or 10 laps of the pool, and I did some backstrokes and breaststrokes and various strokes, and it just and then I just sat there looking at the breeze blowing the trees, and it felt more alive than I had when I was sitting moping in the apartment. So it was a moment of aliveness, I guess.
Yeah. Sure.
It's interesting you say that, Mylan, how aliveness comes in the body. And if you're not, when you're moving, was sitting on the porch early this morning and here came this guy up the street and he was jogging slower than anybody I've ever seen. But he's excited to do it, and I clapped for him. He smiled.
Yeah. I know I was swimming this morning too. We have a pool as well in our community, and I just always come out feeling very mellow. This morning, we had a couple of ducks that decided this was their pool too. And rather than seeing it as I don't know, an issue or problem, I just totally love these ducks being there. They're great. But I also have, I was thinking this week about times when I really felt alive myself in the past. One of the most memorable times was when I got to where I could actually ski down a mountain, ski from the top to the bottom. And at a certain point, I recall just sort of like the mountain carrying me down. I sort of was out of control, but still not falling, right? Somehow my skis were taking me down the mountain. And it was so exhilarating. Oh my gosh. Another memory I had about aliveness was being in Tanzania and being in this village where we would get up at 4:30 in the morning to see the sunrise, because the sunrise would come up all within 1 minute, like 45 to 50 seconds. It would just be dark and then it would be light. And that was also just made you feel like you were part of this amazing creation. I don't know. One of the women in our group, I recall, when we were first getting together as a team, she was from Washington, D.C., a young adult woman who had very prominent parents. And the question going around the group was, well, what brought you here? Why are you here? What, sort of, what's your goal in being here? And this young woman said, I just want the experience of really being alive. And which hit me too, because I had years where I just did all the right things, all the things you're supposed to do as a really young adult. And I didn't feel that alive. But then there's some experiences where it's just totally different than that. Did people get, were you able to look into the building community section of our reading? The chapter 12, page 144, 145, 146. Were people able to, I know that got changed sometime during the week, so.
Could you just, some of us, oh, Mylan, you work off iPad. I do too, but okay.
You want me to find the passage? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
140.
144
Yeah, okay.
to 146.
144.
okay, it is. That
on
is
my
what I
iPad.
read. That's what I read a couple times.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it as a chapter per se, but part
Yeah.
of part
Sort of
4.
a sub-chapter, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm in the
as-
right ballpark.
Yeah, it's in part 2, the reconciling.
Yeah.
Section,
Yeah.
but I was really intrigued by this. And I know some people mentioned in the bigger group having had experiences with either co-housing communities or other intentional communities. But what struck you about any of the pocket neighborhoods or eco villages or transition towns?
You really want to know?
Yeah, I really want to know.
Okay, well, one of the things that struck me in, it's in the part of Eco Villages. There's a list in that second little paragraph about the kinds of things you'd want to have
Yeah.
in your thingy, a childcare facility, play area, a common house
Mhm.
for community meetings, celebrations, regular meals together, an organic community garden, recycling, composting, renewable energy grid, open space for community, perhaps a play space and conversation space, tools, crafts. Nothing about spiritual is celebration is the closest
Mhm.
thing to
Yeah,
any kind of a space
yeah,
that or a thingy that would hold what I'm interested in doing in life. And I think we need more of if we're going to overcome the selfishness, greed, and apathy that he talks about at the very beginning. Anyway, that struck me. Nothing
yeah,
there.
Are you on?
yeah, that struck me, that
I'm
strikes me.
here.
Go ahead. Anybody else?
Well, I was just reflecting on Northfield, where we live, Northfield, Minnesota. It really is an extraordinary town, and it's very full of people who are engaged and that kind of stuff. And when we were starting a co-op, now it's just doubled in size, but just putting that team together, it took nothing. I mean, said we're going to have a meeting and make a little plan to start a co-op, and like 20 people showed up, and they went on Teams, and more people joined, and 2 years later we had a co-op. But that's the way things happen in the town. People are very engaged, and yeah, and it's just really rich. And I think part of
Mhm.
that richness comes from, it's a small town, about 20,000, and two colleges, which are very environmentally conscious.
Yeah, two very wonderful colleges. Yeah,
I was struck how much the emphasis was on physical design. There's the kind of the soft
Mm.
community building means, getting people together and stuff. But I think
Mhm.
it is a real good point that a lot of, well, especially in this country, the way suburban developments are designed is kind of not help. I mean, it's really helpful the way they're designed for work-focused, individual success, high carbon use communities. They're really, I mean, they really fit with our consumer society.
Yeah.
And wow, the massive physical I don't know the right word, but physically designing this in a different way
Mhm.
is very large. But then I think to myself, what about other places in the world? And I think to myself about, what about rural? What about urban? Suburban is kind of uniquely designed, but anyway.
Yeah,
I've been struck lately and disappointed, I must say, at seeing the stock of new housing that's being built. I just was back in Oklahoma
Yeah.
for a couple of weeks, and they're built just house after house after house after house, just right up next against each other. And I don't know if inside it has some of these features that would help with community, but he says right at the beginning that your design of communities is vital for transforming how we live. Here, we have development going on. I don't want it because of our water situation in California, but we have it going on, and they're building these McMansions, 2-story, huge places that people are gonna have to clean. And I mean, I don't know why everybody wants, now, my age people are looking for a one-story, but that's not what the new housing stock is. It's huge.
Where are you,
I'm
Elfrida?
in Marina, California, and this morning, that's Monterey Bay area,
Yeah,
I heard that our governor make an announcement, we're just gonna devote $13 billion. He signed it today. That's a lot of money,
Mhm.
13B, to handle homelessness. And that's gonna be a big part of it is affordable housing. Well, I don't know how it's gonna get built. I don't know who's gonna do it. That's not what I'm seeing built
Yeah.
without that influx.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
troubling,
we're
though.
looking at the same thing in Southern California. I mentioned that we live in a co-op, and one of the things that attracted us to this place 40 years ago was that it was kind of a unique in California, in Southern California anyway, a co-op, and so we got involved and got on, the board. Linda became president of the board, and then later I became president of the board, and I became temporary manager, and we kept trying these community building things and reaching out to people. We had a few people that we could connect with at that level, but to try and turn this co-op into a community, we just burned ourselves out on it. And we still have some pluses about this, but God, it's hard. And it gets discouraging.
Well, I think design is really critical. We live in a community called the Prairie Hills Townhomes, and it's like one street divides the two, but they're right across, and they're in a half, each is in a half moon, and in the center of each circle is a very large island of flowers and garden and stuff like that. And there are probably 10 to 11 families in each one, and there's a board and stuff, but it's very operates very collectively. Everybody comes out in the spring and the fall and works on the garden. Everybody contributes to a certain amount a month. If there's this hailstorm that destroys the roofs, it's a committee just takes care of it, and it gets done. One year the house was cited because the hail was so bad. But it's and it's not like people are really together all the time, but people notice what's happening with each other, like and help each other out. And then we have, like, the women have coffees once a month, and whoever wants to host or come can come. So you get a chance to talk to each other and find out what's going on. And once a year we have a Christmas or a holiday gathering, and people are all just very very, very interesting and experienced in all kinds of international travel, international work. It's really quite a few people who came from farms, and as they got older, they kept their farms, but they didn't want to live and do everything on them anymore. But it's a really not good place to live. I mean, we can go away for 4 months and feel fine about that.
Sounds like a pocket neighborhood.
Turn to
Yes,
page,
it is.
turn
It's
to
all
page
older
one.
people, though. It is all older people. I don't think there's probably anybody there under 60.
Turn to page 140,
Is that also, oh, I'm sorry.
140?
146.
Okay.
He sticks a real hooker in the end of this chapter. He says, in this century, millions of innovative forms of sustainable and satisfying modes of living are surely going to be developed. Alternative communities of every imaginable design will be adapted to local conditions and provide islands of sustainability, relative security, and mutual support by intentional connections with one another in an increasingly chaotic world. Then he says, yet the strength of local self-organizing communities can be a weakness if they are seen as isolated havens of safety to weather the storms of transition. Lifeboats won't save us when the entire earth is sinking and becoming inhospitable to the biology and psychology of human life. It is important for the cohesion realized through local collaborations of mutual support to be able to reach widely and provide the social glue to hold larger networks together.
So there needs to be the local and the building up to the eco-sustainable cities. And yet, if the rest of the earth is crashing, it's like a little lifeboat. It can't do what it could do if everyone was doing community building, right? So say in a sentence or two, anyone, what do you take from that insight? I mean, how would you share what you were just reading to us? How would you share that in a sentence or two with a larger group? Because I was totally taken by that too.
Mhm. I think it's really important not to become insular and have that community be the whole life. I mean, where we live, it's very external. I mean, everybody is involved in all kinds of things in all sorts of ways in governing the city and, you know, being a part of programs for seniors, all kinds of things. And yeah. It's not a protection. For me, it can't have a protect us from the outside feel.
It's hard for me to get in my imagination if the collapse is really advanced and serious, how without the kind of technology we have come to rely on for those connections beyond the pocket and beyond the neighborhood and beyond, you know, where we are, if that's gone, you know, I don't know what's going to replace that. That it's kind of scary to me to think, because the whole grid could, you know, be disrupted, and all of this wonderful stuff we rely on to connect with the outside world and other places in the world. If that goes down and we're isolated, it's hard to, it's not impossible, but it'll be a lot more painful, I think.
Well, that would create a stark difference in terms of the necessity of connecting with neighbors physically near.
Yeah.
If those other things began to be cut off.
But that also could increase the likelihood of that insulation and just sort of protecting our space.
Sort of the islands, of support.
Yeah. When we're living here in Wisconsin, there is a feel for us of wanting to stay protected. On the way into town here, one of the families on one of the big farms has put up a billboard. It's the first 24 campaign sign, maybe in the country, and of course it's for Trump, but it, you know, has flags. I mean, it's big. It's right on the main road coming in here. And Wisconsin is just really Trumpian country. In fact, we've kind of quit going to a local thing that's a bar type restaurant that's been going for a very long time. They've expanded, and it's a gazillion trailers, and people are just swarming all over the place. And you can tell from the way people are dressed that they're mostly Trump supporters, because they're pretty visible, you know. And so this whole part of the country here is, I mean, for me, one of the things, how can we do these things when we have such an extraordinary political divide in the country, and see no way? It's very hard to see a way of working with each other. And it's very different here than where we live in Minnesota. And
Mhm.
Wisconsin has a totally different feel to it than does Minnesota. And I think part of it is the political divide.
Mhm. So right now, just for everybody in the group, Barrett is in her Wisconsin cabin, which is in a very Trumpian part of Wisconsin, as opposed to her very progressive Northfield, Minnesota, which is an ideal kind of community in the other direction. Yeah.
Yeah, we live very solitarily here
Mhm, mhm.
and love it.
And
Um,
it's good, good to have that option. I mean,
Yeah.
how to hang on to some of that, too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to have us, because we're getting sort of close to the time, I think. Jim, maybe check a watch or time.
23 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Oh, okay. 23 minutes
In our
left
group, in our group.
in our group. Okay, so we're good.
But we're gonna make a report.
We are
So-
going to make a report, and that's what's on my mind is my thought would be to have someone volunteer to make the main points that we're coming up with, and then the rest of us be responsible for adding any insights or things we might have missed that were important in our conversation. So, but could we have someone volunteer to make main points? And I've written down 3 of them so far. The idea that the design of your community is essential and critical in terms of how you can build the actual relationships in a community. And I think that was Barrett talking there for the most part. And the second one being that we can't become insular. We have to connect to the larger life around us. And not think of our little small community as a protection from the outside world, but more a way to reach up and out and connect to the outside world. And 3, and I think this was Mylan talking, how do we work through the divide in our country toward what we say is important here and what the author is saying is important here, that not only are we building up something new in the way of just a newly woven together community that shares much more and has a greater simplicity of life, but greater commonality, greater stronger sense of community. But at the same time, how do we do that when we're so divided as a country? That is a good question.
Yeah, I think that was Barrett, actually.
Is that Barrett? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, how about, is there another point we're seeing here, or another thought, another insight from
Well,
what?
I did make the point about technology.
Mhm.
If that collapses along with
Oh,
other everything else, the other institutions of social connectedness, that's kind of a big
Yeah.
factor in our I mean, because just this weekend we were on another Zoom call with some other colleagues, and Jim and I were in that group, and that was a reaching out that was refreshing and aliveness. So there's that connection to the outside and the
Yeah.
other places.
Yeah.
So this is, this part 4 is really about opportunity. That
Mhm.
having looked at what the data seems to be saying about the next 50 years, what are the wonderful opportunities in front of us? And here, the wonderful opportunity is we're going to have to rebuild community and the whole settlement pattern at the end of this century is going to be way, way different
Mhm.
than it is now. the infrastructure of it, the settlement patterns, and it's not going to be based on, it's not necessarily going to be based on our notions of community. I appreciate what Mylan was saying about,
Mm-hmm.
we have, from being with the Institute, we have this notion of community
Yeah.
and people are working together and celebrating together and all that stuff. And people don't just like go, oh my God, that's wonderful. We'll do that. That's great. And also, I mean, I think what
Right.
he's not just saying only planetary liberals are going to move into community. He's saying willy-nilly, there's going to be a rebuild of community, and it hadn't fundamentally to do with, well, I think he would say that our divide, our divisiveness in this country is more the result of our settlement patterns than it is the cause.
Mhm.
Yeah, that doesn't,
Mhm.
I'm not so sure about that. If we had to divide into settlement patterns right now, I think it'd be political. And that's for me extremely dangerous. I think we're moving in an extremely dangerous direction, that the political divisions aren't being reduced, they're being intensified. And I don't have a way. I mean, I don't even, it's like I don't even want to approach anybody about politics. It's, there's sort of a non-rational, impassioned stake in the ground that I think is bordering on terrifying. And I think it's growing. And
Well,
I
Okay.
don't know how to counter that. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
because the thing that's most noticeable in this country is the politics. And that is what has destroyed a lot of civilizations over the years. And so, I mean, when things really get bad here, what is going to happen? Are people going to divide into their political conclaves, build walls and shoot each other? I think it's really terrifying.
There will be some of that, Barrett, but I
Yeah.
really, I'm not as terrified as you. I know, I feel you, I feel your pain, but I think we are slowly getting through this, and a lot's going to depend on, the next few years. This decade is really, really, really critical on a number of fronts. But I think we're going, that part of it, I think, is not going to be the determining
Yeah.
factor.
What will be the turn? What will it that will turn things? It's like now in the midst of the pandemic, it's resurging again because of a huge group of people that refuse to take it seriously. And I mean,
True.
what is it that's going to happen to make a shift so the camps don't get more divided,
Mhm.
I mean, I like to think about that, but you land in this part of the country and it doesn't look all that opportune, like that opportunity is here much.
Okay.
I have to step aside just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Continue the conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
the camps aren't two though, Barrett.
What,
There's a
what,
whole-
Alfreda?
they're not two camps, there's more camps.
Oh, yes.
We've got
yes.
this inner city, people of
Yeah.
color that will not get vaccinated. They don't trust it.
Yes, yeah,
Anyway,
thanks.
the thing about, we said that we can't become insular. Well, it seems to me that it sort of depends on whatever the local is, has to be represented, has to be counted on to be diverse. Or you are just going to have these pockets of insularity. And we do have this great migration going on right now of political division of living. We've got all the people who don't
Yeah.
like California going to Idaho just by the, anywhere else.
Yeah.
We've got because California's blue and we want to go where it's red, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so it is
Yep.
going on, the division. And I know it
That-
it seems to be the
that-
biggest thing that we have to contend.
That is true, but some of them are going to Texas and Texas is getting more blue, so.
And they're changing it in Texas, I hope.
They're trying to
hope they're
keep it
changing
red, but
The
yeah.
attitudes in Texas. But we've got to, well, it was helpful. Jim said this is about opportunity to structure it so that it would be different. If you just keep living with the divide.
So I guess we're gonna have to come to terms with what is no longer possible and what is still possible in this conversation. That, there's some things we're not gonna be able to stop. We're not gonna be able to change. There are other things we do have some say in and some impact on.
I guess I'm back with Barrett's description of Northfield because I also know Northfield, not as well as she does, but I admire Northfield as a really cultural, creative kind of community. And is there a lesson or something we could draw from a community that does seem to work well for the people that could help build, because he's building up from these very small micro groups to a sustainable city size thing. What about the size of maybe not the 10, 12 people pocket neighborhood, but more like the eco villages or the micro communities that have hundreds or small town levels of people? What can we draw from what does work? What is working in a place like Northfield, just as an example?
But Joyce, that isn't working totally. I mean, the Hispanic community has been more integrated into the community, and there are Hispanic businesses, et cetera, and you interact with people on the street. The Black community is not visible in Northfield except at the colleges. I mean, I do not know of one Black-owned business in town. Walking down the street, going to the bookstore, going to the library, whatever, you see very, very few Black human beings. And so that's huge for me. I mean, that's just huge.
Yeah, we have a similar situation in Redlands. This project Linda is working on that is based on the ANCA program from Denver. We have the kind of community that's about 70,000, but it still has enough of that community feel that there's a lot of community activities that go on. Like we have a summer concert series that thousands of people come to and interact sociably and without a lot of rancor. And so this community building from the neighborhood level, we think may have some possibility that can still connect throughout the city, because we do have the city sponsorship, the university sponsorship, a big employer on some involvement in the what do you call the authorization and support level, but then the working at the neighborhood level, making these connections on a project to just come up with plan for resilient neighborhoods. So we'll see how it goes, but I think a community of your size, Barrett, to our size, maybe even a little larger, still could be a viable community.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like the hearts and minds of men are going to have to change to create a different desire of what to have and I didn't mean men, that, but he talks about moving away from this ego economy into an aliveness economy. I want the people constructing the housing to think differently, but they're going to think differently when we call for different ways of being together. And that seems to me to be a hard issue. So how do we take advantage of the opportunity we have to change the settlement pattern by the end of the century?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's amazing. Oh.
They say by the-
Well,
Paul does,
Um,
there's such diversity also, how, there's a lot of effort, I haven't lived in a central city for a long time. But there's a lot of effort in terms of community gardens,
Mhm.
a lot of activism, this transition towns and stuff is there, this eco-civilization. China has it in their policy, their official policy as a country, that they're gonna be an ecological civilization. So there's at that level, and I had lunch with Sunny Walker yesterday. And she's been talking about these neighborhood things, and she talked about how in some ways the city of Denver is ahead of the neighborhoods
Mm.
in trying to move towards something more sustainable. And so I think there is momentum at these different settlement levels. And then I don't even know how to talk about that. There are so many people buying and selling houses and buying and selling houses. And many people are trying to sell a house so they can buy a house cheaper
Mhm.
somewhere else that they could live. So this kind of, in that sense, there's a kind of a beginning of this migration, refugee kind of thing,
Yeah.
where people are realizing what's going on, but the pressure to towards the McMansion kind of development,
mhm.
it feels really strong, though. Yeah, it's.
Mhm. Hey, Jim, you've got a different background. Have you moved?
Yeah, I went
No,
to the
he's-
bathroom and I came back, but
No, he says.
No, behind you.
I was thinking
Are
as
you
you
gonna
were,
I've been sitting out on, I've been out on the porch because everybody else was home having dinner, but everybody went out. So I'm alone in the house I've got 3 birds and 3 dogs and me.
We hear the birds.
Yeah,
I noticed the dog once.
Yeah.
there's the birds.
um,
But have you all read, I think it's Octavia Butler? She's
no,
a science fiction writer.
Mm-mm.
no.
Oh my God.
Write it down.
She,
What's a book?
I don't remember. I read half of it. I sent it back to the library. But it was really about, breakdown and collapse and the building of community. But it was not pleasant.
Oh.
It was not pleasant at all. But
Maybe
what you
let's not go
think
too
about-
far in that direction
Yeah.
right now.
Um,
I was thinking of it.
It's gonna take 10, 15 years. Well, see, when you go to think globally,
yeah, then that's another wrinkle.
I think the point of that our hearts are going to need to change. So, move from our head to our heart level in building our future communities, to really respond to people's real needs and not just simply somebody's profit motive in building more units, higher, more stacked together. A lot of it needs to shift to really looking at, what are the community desires, community needs, where's the common space. I live right up the hill from a place that used to have lots of green space to now it's total buildings, just as solid as New York City. And nobody planned for any community green space. But
I had to go to, I got a rash, so I had to go to this dermatologist. And it was 15, not far, 15, half an hour, whatever, south of here. And I got into the town of Lone Tree, which I didn't actually even know existed. And there was an apartment building and an apartment, like, you know, somebody's talking about houses next to one another. These were apartment buildings next to one another.
Mhm.
Boom, 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 block after block.
Yeah,
And
that.
I began, not that I was terrified, but it was like I was terrified. And I was going,
Hyperventilated.
oh, well, and I went, oh my God, there are so many people. And that, I mean, if this is not, what he's describing is not about, you know, the 5 of us and our friends.
Mhm.
It's 7 billion people have to be settled somewhere, going on
Mhm.
toward 9 billion people being settled somewhere.
Mhm.
In the midst of who knows what's going to happen with the infrastructure. Since I've been reading this book, I go to get a glass of water and I turn the water on and I think, well, thank God it's still running.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, there are some scenarios that are predicting a great die-off and a great burn off. So we need to take those into consideration too. The population is not gonna be sustained.
It's clearly
in
not.
this. Yeah.
Not at the lifestyle level we're living or hoping to live. That's true. Let me ask, who would like to take our 3, 4,
Choice.
5 major points to the larger group, and helped by all of us, of course. But it seems like we've been working with a design issue, not becoming too insular, connecting with larger life in our community building, how to work through the divisions in our country as we're building new communities, how to weave together the diversity, the differences. That would probably include, we haven't really talked about the economic huge differences, but well, somebody mentioned how do we work in the affordable housing? And then if technology collapses, how do we deal with that? And then having to really move to a heart level as we work with rebuilding community. Communities that are sustainable and that are really supportive to people and not so isolated as we've become, especially in suburban, or urban and suburban places. But anyway, who would like to do that?
I nominate Joyce because she's.
You're
gone
very
through
well
that 2 times.
positioned,
If you did
Sunny.
it one more, she'd
Yeah.
have it really good.
Took more
I mean,
notes than anybody.
It's the second time you've went through it. You know it. I know it's a lot to dump on you, but I think you're the one. I
All
really,
right, I'll tell you what, I'll do it if you all,
yeah.
chime
Chime
in,
in.
add any insights or thoughts that you really gained from this conversation too.
And thank you. I'm teasing a little bit, but thank you for listening.
Mhm.
I appreciate that you're putting that effort in to kind of hear what's going on and try to capture our thoughts and stuff. But I guess the opportunity is, if you want to build, if you really want to build community and you want an overwhelming challenge, whether you're an architect, an urban planner, a rural planner, infrastructural engineer, by golly, you, an ombudsman.
10 seconds.
Yeah, 7 seconds. See you on the other side,
If
okay?
you really want to.
Thank
What?
you. Great conversation.
Okay, we can stay.
It says 113 seconds on mine.
We got 112 seconds still to see it.
Yeah.
It's
Where'd Joyce
stopped,
go?
and then we've got transition time.
Okay, all right.
What's it gonna take to do this?
Well, you know, if they say by the end of the century, people aren't gonna own cars. We're gonna have, you know, self-driving vehicles that you just summon with your app and takes you where you want to go. And
That's
no one's gonna-
assuming we have the resources to do all that
Yeah,
stuff.
But I mean,
We're depleting all the resources faster than we're gonna be able to build it, I think.
But if we can envision something like that, we can envision a whole new way of living that we don't have
Yeah.
to be trapped into this money making, make as much as you can by the builders.
True.
Yeah, we don't have to be trapped in it.
Well,
Okay.
then you just think about all the industry and the changes that are gonna have to be made. That's where I kind of hit a wall imaginally is how does this happen? You know, I mean, big oil, whatever. How does it happen other than a disaster that forces companies into it? Are those big systematic changes going to get done?
Well, that's, I mean, I'm thinking about that video we saw a couple times ago about this notion of lift. All we have to do is wait and it'll all collapse. So that scenario is easy. And the question is if there's ways for people like us or other people to create enough lift that people don't just go, well, it's collapse.
Oh,